Children's television has always been a window into young minds, teaching them about numbers, letters, and life's little lessons. But in 2016, something changed in the static between channels. A clown appeared on TV screens across Chicago, teaching lessons that would turn family homes into crime scenes and transform innocent children into something else entirely. Nobody understood how a simple cartoon could create such horror, not until Detective Michael Cooper pieced together the bloody trail of Bobble the Clown. In the past 6 months, the Chicago Police Department had responded to 4 separate homicide scenes with the same inexplicable pattern. Each time, they found the parents brutally murdered in their homes, bodies mutilated in ways that made veteran detectives turn away. And each time, they found the children, all under 10 years old, sitting calmly in their rooms, unharmed. Detective Michael Cooper had worked homicide for 15 years, but these cases were different. The forensics team kept finding the same peculiar details. Precise incisions on the bodies that suggested medical knowledge, missing organs that appeared to have been removed methodically, and in 3 of the cases, evidence that parts of the victims had been cooked and consumed. In the Anderson case, they found a perfectly prepared liver on the dining room table, garnished with herbs from the family's garden. The Mendoza scene had small, careful knife marks on the bones, matching the techniques used in professional butcher shops. The children who survived never showed signs of trauma. They answered questions clearly, describing normal evenings at home. None of them heard anything unusual. None of them saw anyone enter the house. They just went to bed and woke up to find their parents dead. The Martinez boy, only 7 years old, was found drawing pictures of internal organs with anatomical precision when the police arrived. Cooper spent months chasing dead ends. No signs of forced entry, no DNA evidence, no connections between the families. The case files piled up on his desk, filled with crime scene photos that kept him awake at night. The press had started calling it the sleeping child murders, and the public was demanding answers. Reports started coming in from neighboring districts. Similar cases, always with children under 10, always with the same methodical mutilations. Then came the 5th scene. This one hit closer to home. The Reeves family. Cooper had known John Reeves since high school, had dinner at their house just 2 weeks ago with his own wife and 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Now, John and his wife, Sarah, lay dead in their kitchen, their bodies arranged like some twisted cooking show demonstration. Their 9-year-old son, Tyler, sat in his bedroom playing video games when the police arrived. Something about Tyler's demeanor during questioning nagged at Cooper. The boy described techniques used in the murders with clinical detachment, using terms no child should know. When asked about his parents' cooking, Tyler mentioned that human meat needs to be prepared carefully to avoid disease. He said it casually, like reciting facts from a science class. Cooper requested the case files for all 5 scenes again. He started looking for patterns in the children's statements, things he'd missed before. The breakthrough came buried in the interview notes. All 5 kids mentioned watching their favorite TV show, Bobble the Clown, in the days before the murders. The show didn't exist on any network, no streaming service had it. But when Cooper questioned the children again, they described it in perfect detail. An educational-style cartoon about a clown who taught special lessons. Tyler Reeves remembered an episode about proper knife technique and organ removal. Another child recalled learning about how to move silently through a house at night. The Martinez boy described an episode called Bobble's Kitchen Surprise, where the clown demonstrated the best ways to prepare different cuts of special meat. Cooper began tracking broadcast signals in the areas where the murders occurred. He found unusual patterns, ghost frequencies that appeared for 30 minutes at a time, but every time he tried to view the intercepted content, he blacked out, waking up with splitting headaches. The signals were spreading. Reports of similar frequencies started appearing in Milwaukee, Detroit, Indianapolis. The department's tech team eventually captured a segment. The footage showed a crudely animated clown demonstrating what appeared to be cooking techniques, but the content was far more sinister. Cooper watched the tech team's youngest intern, barely out of high school, describe what he saw. Bobble cheerfully explaining the best ways to harvest and prepare human organs. The intern described other episodes too, lessons about which household tools made the best weapons, how to disable home security systems, where to cut to make someone stop screaming. Reports kept coming in. A 6-year-old in Detroit found with bloody kitchen knives. Twin 8-year-olds in Milwaukee discovered preparing their parents' remains. A 9-year-old in Indianapolis teaching younger siblings about proper organ removal. Each child mentioned Bobble, described his lessons, recited his teachings like multiplication tables. As Cooper drove home that night, the pieces started fitting together. The show was targeting children, teaching them things no child should know. And they were learning and using those lessons on their own families. The signal was spreading faster now, jumping from city to city, reaching more children every night. He pulled into his driveway at 9:47 p.m. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of a TV coming from upstairs. His wife's car wasn't in the driveway. She'd mentioned something about a late meeting. Cooper climbed the stairs, following the flickering light coming from Emma's room. The door was slightly open. Through the gap, he could see his daughter sitting cross-legged on her bed, eyes fixed on her small TV screen. On it, a crudely animated clown was demonstrating something with a large knife, making precise cuts in what looked like a side of meat. Behind Emma, laid out neatly on her desk, was a row of kitchen knives from downstairs, arranged by size just like Bobble had taught in episode 3. Emma turned toward the door. The knife skills episode was her favorite so far, she said. Bobble was teaching her so many interesting things about anatomy. She had been practicing, she explained, pointing to the fresh cuts on her arms where she had been testing blade angles and pressure points. In the 6 months since the first murder, 17 more families would join the case files. Each time, the children would be found unharmed, watching TV in their rooms. The signal kept spreading, city by city, home by home. And somewhere in the static between channels, Bobble the Clown continued to broadcast his lessons, reaching out to young minds in the darkness, teaching them things that no child should ever learn. By the time anyone realized how far the signal had spread, it was already too late. Parents across the Midwest started noticing their children humming Bobble's theme song, practicing his lessons, waiting for the right time to show what they had learned. Are you sure you're safe in the comfort of your home? Well, if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales. One night in 2014, 6 college students decided to have a sleepover at a house near their campus in Missouri. What started as a simple prank targeting one of their classmates ended with 4 survivors who would spend years trying to convince doctors that the monster under the bed wasn't just in their heads. The group had gathered at Mike Thompson's house, a 2-story home his parents had left him when they moved to Florida. The targeted girl was always the quiet one in their friend group. She kept to herself, rarely went to parties, and had this weird habit of always checking under her bed before sleeping. Her classmates found this amusing. A 24-year-old woman still afraid of monsters under the bed. That's when Ashley, Mike's girlfriend, came up with what she thought would be a hilarious prank. They'd wait until fell asleep, then wake her up with someone in a monster costume crawling from under her bed. They'd film it, post it online, get some laughs. Simple enough. The night started normally. Pizza, drinks, movies. They had set up sleeping bags in the living room, but insisted on sleeping in the guest bedroom upstairs. She always needed a proper bed to sleep, she said. This worked perfectly with their plan. Around midnight, after had gone upstairs, the group started preparing. Mike put on the costume, a cheap rubber mask and black clothes. The others positioned themselves with their phones ready to record. They waited an hour to make sure she was asleep. That's when things went wrong. As Mike started sliding under the bed, the room suddenly got colder. The phones recording the prank started glitching, screens filling with static. Then they heard it, a low, guttural sound coming from under the bed. Before anyone could react, something grabbed Mike's ankle and pulled him under. The screaming started immediately. Not just Mike's terrified shrieks, but a horrible mixture of crushing bones and wet, tearing sounds. The other students froze in place, their phones still recording nothing but static, as Mike's legs, still visible from under the bed, began jerking violently. Then came the smell, like wet stone and decay. A massive gray-green arm, longer than any human arm should be, shot out from under the bed. Yellow eyes with no pupils glowed in the darkness, followed by 3 rows of shark-like teeth. The creature's black hair hung wet and matted around its horns, dripping something dark onto the carpet. Woke up to her friend's screams. She immediately realized what was happening and began begging the creature, something she called Grenda, to stop. But the entity was already feeding, not on flesh, but on the pure terror filling the room. The air itself seemed to vibrate with their fear. Sarah and Kevin tried running for the door. The creature moved with impossible speed, its rat-like tail whipping through the air as it grabbed them both. They vanished under the bed, their screams echoing as if from far away. What they experienced in those next 15 minutes would break their minds. They found themselves falling through absolute darkness, the creature's claws digging into their flesh. When they landed, they were in a massive cave lit by glowing purple stones. The entity released them, vanishing into the shadows. For what felt like hours, it stalked them through the cavern, letting them see glimpses of its horrific form, sometimes crawling on the walls, sometimes swimming in the black lake at the cave's center, always just at the edge of their vision. Every time they tried hiding, they'd hear its claws scraping against stone, getting closer and closer. The creature would grab them, dangle them over the water, let them feel its hot breath on their faces before disappearing again. It was playing with them, feeding on their terror. Meanwhile, upstairs, John tried helping Ashley reach the window, but those elongated arms wrapped around both their waists, dragging them under different sides of the bed. John emerged seconds later, soaking wet and screaming about drowning in darkness. Ashley vanished for nearly 20 minutes. When she reappeared, she was curled in a fetal position, drenched in cave water, missing not just her socks, but chunks of her hair. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on something the others couldn't see. Later, in the hospital, she would tell the doctors about finding a collection in that cave. Hundreds of socks pinned to the walls like butterflies in a display case, children's toys arranged on stone shelves, and dozens of photos of at different ages. The police arrived to find chaos. Mike's body was unrecognizable, his bones crushed and twisted. Sarah and Kevin were huddled in opposite corners, their hair shock-white, skin covered in scratches from the cave walls. John was trying to claw his way through the bedroom wall, babbling about needing to escape the darkness. Ashley hadn't spoken a word since her return, but her arms were covered in self-inflicted bite marks. She'd later explained she'd done it to prove she wasn't dreaming. Was the only one physically unharmed, sitting on the bed and crying. She tried explaining about her protector, about how Grenda had been with her since childhood, how the creature had misunderstood the prank as a real threat. The police naturally assumed she was as traumatized as the others. The official report listed the incident as a tragic accident. Investigators theorized that the group had taken drugs, leading to mass hysteria and Mike's death by misadventure. They couldn't explain the cave water in the victims' clothes, the strange purple dust in their hair that no lab could identify, or the fact that every electronic device in the room had been completely fried. The 4 survivors were committed to psychiatric care. Their stories were too similar to be coincidence, but too impossible to be true. Sarah never spoke again. Kevin developed severe aquaphobia and would scream at the sight of any standing water. John could no longer sleep in darkness. Even the faintest shadow would trigger violent panic attacks. Ashley spent months drawing the cave's layout and everything she'd seen in the creature's collection, until the doctors took away her drawing privileges. Only knew the truth, and within days, she would be taken into Foundation custody. Her friends remained in psychiatric care, their minds shattered by what they'd experienced. The doctors noted one particularly disturbing detail. None of the survivors would ever sleep in a room with a bed again. They'd rather sleep on the floor, in chairs, or not at all. In the end, what makes this incident particularly disturbing isn't just the horror of what happened that night. It's that somewhere in a cave, accessible only through the darkness under a bed, a creature tends to its growing collection, now including 5 new pairs of socks, a chunk of Ashley's hair, and a rubber monster mask, still stained with what used to be Mike Thompson. If you enjoy these terrifying encounters with SCP-993 and SCP-3887, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next tales.